After being demoted to guarding the company's warehouse gates for 3 years, my manager suddenly decided he wanted to reinstate me. When he marched down to find me with a horde of executives in tow, I was right in the middle of a mobile game with my 2 work buddies. A manager immediately lost his temper, barking at me. You used to be a decent team lead, and now you're rolling in the mud with these lowlifes. Get your ass back to your desk. There's a major contract that needs your signature. Zach, the supervisor who had stolen my position, looked at my dusty, worn-out clothes and sneered. It's your lucky day, Finn. The company books have a tiny $100 million leak. If you just sign this confession and admit you took the money, the company promises to take care of you for life. VP Richard, wearing his usual greasy, friendly mask, chimed in, what's the point of wasting your life with these 2 losers? Make the fall for this, and the moment you get out, I'll hand you a promotion on a silver platter. My fingers never stopped tapping the screen, but I was practically shaking with suppressed laughter. Losers, trash. If only they knew who my 2 seemingly ordinary gaming buddies actually were. One was Nate, the chairman's actual grandson, who was just here to experience how the other half lived. The other was Wilson, our supreme group president, who had gone undercover to inspect the grassroots level, a man who detested even a single grain of corruption. I just landed a triple kill when the heavy metal door of the warehouse was kicked open with a deafening bang. 7 or 8 people filed into the room. The 3 men leading the pack stood front and center, flanked by several other managers. They had brought quite an entourage. And get your ass back to the main office and sign these papers, Manager Logan said, looking down his nose at me. I didn't even look up from my screen. Get ready for the team fight, I muttered into my headset. Logan's face, flushed with anger at being ignored, snatched the phone right out of my hands and slammed it onto the metal workbench with a loud crash. Don't push your luck, Finn, Logan snarled. The company is doing you a massive favor by letting you back into your old position. Who do you think you are? I kicked you from a director's office down to this godforsaken hole with a single word, and I can send you packing to starve on the streets just as easily. VP Richard stood with his arms crossed, his face twisted in contempt. Kid has zero ambition. We offer him a golden ladder, and he doesn't even have the sense to climb it. Instead, he wastes his time playing video games with a couple of useless drifters. I finally looked up, my eyes cold. Weren't you the one who banished me here, Richard? 3 years ago, I was on the fast track to a promotion. You wanted to put one of your own guys in my chair, so you made up a pathetic excuse and threw me to the gates of this warehouse. After throwing me out like trash, they thought a snapped order would bring me crawling back. Logan's eyes glinted with calculation. He assumed I had no choice. A forgotten gatekeeper would jump at any bone tossed his way. I stood up slowly, took one last drag from my cigarette, and blew a thick cloud of smoke directly into Logan's face. He coughed and sputtered, his eyes wide with rage. But Zach, the newly minted supervisor, quickly held him back. Finn, don't be stupid, Zach said, a greasy smile plastered across his face. We're trying to help you get your old life back. The new project is huge, and we need an experienced manager. You're the best fit. Besides, we used to be brothers. I never set you up. I let out a dry laugh. Brothers? I practically raised you in this industry, Zach. I gave you half my clients and taught you everything I knew. And you repaid me by going behind my back, stealing my accounts, and framing me for taking kickbacks. You don't get to call me your brother. Zach had started as my intern. I had poured everything into mentoring him, only for him to stab me in the back the moment he got a taste of greed exposed. Zach's face twisted in embarrassment, sneered, looking down at my dusty, faded blue-collar uniform. What are you acting so high and mighty for? You think we can't handle a pathetic gatekeeper? We try to play nice, but if you want to make this difficult, we have other ways. He flicked his wrist, and 2 burly security guards stepped forward, towering over me. If you won't sign willingly, we'll drag you to the office and press your thumb onto the ink ourselves. Beside me, Nate and Wilson, my 2 gaming buddies, set their phones down. They stood up, frowning. What do you think you're doing? You want to get physical? Logan's expression curdled at the interruption. What do you 2 warehouse rats know about anything? He sneered, waving them off like pesky flies. Get lost. This is a management matter. So, working in the warehouse means we aren't part of the company? Wilson asked, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. He spoke with his usual slow, measured cadence. There's a chain of command, and using your corporate authority to threaten and harass an employee is a blatant violation of labor laws. Labor laws? Zach burst out laughing. Can you illiterate garbage even read the employee handbook? What do you know about the law? He pointed a thumb at VP Richard. Do you have any idea who Richard's backing is? Even the chairman has to treat him with respect. Labor laws. We could tear this entire warehouse down, and the chairman wouldn't dare say a word to us. Keep running your mouths, and I'll fire both of you on the spot. The chairman, Nate, shrugged, a faint smirk playing on his lips. That's funny. I've never heard him mention your names before. Richard blinked, then erupted into a roaring laugh. What kind of delusional garbage are you spitting? You know the chairman? You look like a beggar who can't even get past the lobby doors. Keep dreaming, kid. Wilson's gaze turned frosty. Richard, the chairman might not know you, but I certainly do. A year ago, you were caught skimming from the employee bonus pool. I thought you had learned your lesson, but it seems you've only grown more reckless. Do you honestly think you could pull off a stunt like this without anyone noticing? Richard's face went from pale to a dark, furious red. Wilson had hit a nerve. Exposed in front of his subordinates, VP. Richard exploded. What the hell did you just say? Seeing his boss lose his temper, Manager Logan lunged forward, grabbing Wilson by the collar and yanking him out of his chair. Where did you get these pathetic rumors? You piece of trash. Our VP is a man of absolute integrity. Keep running your mouth, and I'll personally shut it for you. He shoved Wilson hard. Wilson stumbled back, crashing into a heavy metal shelf. His glasses flew off, his face shattering on the concrete. Wilson, I yelled, rushing forward to help him. Up. What is wrong with you? Why are you hands-on? Wilson was a man of quiet refinement. He had a small army of assistants to handle any unpleasantness in his daily life. He had never dealt with such raw, brutish violence before. I'm the one you want, I yelled, shielding them. Leave them out of this. Nate pulled out his phone, his face pale with anger. You guys are dead. Zach was fast. He snatched the phone right out of Nate's hand, holding it triumphantly above his head. Who are you going to call? Huh? The police. Go ahead and try. My guys will have you broken in half before they even dispatch a car. Logan waved his hand dismissively. Enough talk. Why are we wasting our breath on these minimum wage losers? You step on them, and they still think your shoes smell nice. The managers burst into cruel laughter, looking down at us like we were bugs. Even the other warehouse workers began whispering among themselves, pointing fingers. But the warehouse supervisor cut in, pointing at Wilson, Nate, and me, shouting, You three ungrateful idiots, how dare you disobey direct orders from the corporate office? I'll fire all of you. By the end of the shift, Logan nodded with satisfaction, then turned back to me. Finn, I'll ask you one last time. Are you signing the papers? If you say no, you're fired right now. Logan smirked. He had watched me sweat and bleed for that director position 3 years ago. I knew I had a mortgage to pay and a family to support in the city. He knew that if I got fired at my age, finding another decent job would be nearly impossible. My family would starve. The onlookers chuckled when they heard the threat of termination, but everyone expected me to break. They thought I loved this job too much to lose it. Instead, I shrugged, completely unfazed. Go ahead and fire me. It's not like there's any lower room for demotion anyway. The entire room went dead silent. Nobody expected me to throw away my livelihood so easily. Zach stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. Think carefully, Finn. Once you're out of this company, you're blacklisted. You'll never recover. Spent too much time rolling in the mud with these losers. You don't even know what's good for you anymore. I laughed. Do whatever you want. Fire me. You guys have never cared about rules anyway. What can a simple gatekeeper do to stop you? Seeing my stubbornness, VP Richard stepped forward, patting Logan on the shoulder. He turned to me with a greasy paternal smile. And let's be reasonable. The company has been very generous to you for 3 years. We've paid your salary and kept your benefits active. Any other place would have thrown you out onto the street long ago. We're offering you a lifeline out of old friendship. You sign for the $100 million and you'll do a few easy years. When you get out, the associate director's share is yours and the company will take care of you for the rest of your life. You're a gatekeeper, Finn. What other future do you have? He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You need to understand something. I can make you or break you with a single phone call. Cooperate and everyone wins. Refuse, and I'll make sure no company in this state ever hires you again. I looked him dead in the eye and smiled. Richard, there's always a bigger fish in the sea. Did you really think your crimes would stay buried forever? Richard's smile vanished. He nodded to the 2 burly guards to grab me. But Nate stepped directly in front of me, his chest puffed out. If you lay one hand on him, I'm telling my grandfather everything. Your grandfather? Zach mocked, bursting into another fit of laughter. Who the hell is your grandfather? A construction worker or a street sweeper? Nate ignored him, locking his eyes on VP Richard. His corporate authority is nothing compared to my grandfather's. You look down on us for earning minimum wage, but my grandfather makes more in an hour than you'll see in a lifetime. The warehouse fell quiet for a fraction of a second before exploding into hysterical laughter. But they couldn't fathom a warehouse worker having any real power. Enough games, VP Richard snapped, his patience entirely depleted. Unless you can miraculously summon the group president himself to this filthy floor. You're signing those papers today? I glanced at Wilson, who was staring at VP Richard with a dark, terrifying expression. It was a look I recognized last week when the supervisor was tricked into signing a fraudulent supplier agreement. Wilson had taken one look at it, and the supplier had come crawling back the next morning begging to tear up the contract. Wilson was a man who detested corruption, and he certainly wasn't going to let these thugs walk all over us. He spoke, his tone completely flat. $100 million deficit, and you are certain you want Finn to take the blame for it? Richard scowled, really deigning to look at Wilson. Who asked you, old man? You want to pack your bags, too? Wilson pulled a spare pair of glasses from his breast pocket, slipped them on, and stared at Logan and his cronies. You said only the president could resolve this. How do you want to handle it? He pulled out his phone and pressed speed dial. His voice wasn't loud, but in the quiet warehouse, every word carried like thunder. This is Wilson Pendleton. Send the Internal Affairs and Audit Division to the West Side warehouse immediately. We have a massive embezzlement case to secure. Wilson hung up. VP Richard's face drained of color, his lips trembling slightly. Wilson Pendleton, the president? What are you doing here? Zach and Logan stared in disbelief. The president working in a dusty warehouse? That's impossible. There must be a mistake. Zach leaned in close to Richard, whispering urgently, Richard, have you ever actually seen the president in person? He's bluffing. The corporate office never said anything about Wilson inspecting the warehouse floor. Hearing this, Richard's panic turned back into red-hot fury. His greasy sneer returned. The group president on a warehouse floor? You really think I'm that stupid? Everyone knows Wilson Pendleton is in Europe. How dare you pretend to be the president to scare me? You warehouse trash really or something else? I'm going to make sure you never walk again. Then grab all three of them and beat some sense into them. The burly guards closed in on Wilson. Seeing that his actual title meant nothing to these thugs, Wilson's face went completely dark. How dare you touch the president of this company? One of the guards laughed, spitting on the floor. The president? If you're the president, I'm his father. They grabbed Nate, too. He struggled against their grip, shouting, I'm the chairman's grandson. If you touch me, my grandfather will destroy you. The managers ignored his threats, laughing in his face. Go ahead and cry to your granddaddy, kid. The other workers watched, whispering coldly. But then a guard grabbed Wilson by the throat, pinning him against a shelf. Two other men pinned my arms behind my back, while another guard kicked Nate hard in the back of the knee, forcing him to his knees on the concrete. I'm going to break you pieces of trash. Suddenly, a roaring, authoritative voice echoed from the warehouse entrance. Who dares to touch my grandson? The warehouse doors didn't just open, they were thrown apart. Cold daylight poured in, cutting across the metal shelves like a blade. The guards froze for half a second at the voice that echoed through the space. Who dares to touch my grandson? Every head snapped toward the entrance. A tall, elderly man stood there, flanked by black-suited security personnel who looked nothing like the sloppy warehouse guards. These men moved with military precision. Behind them, more executives poured in, their faces already pale as if they had been running the entire way. Zach's confident smirk evaporated instantly. Logan's grip loosened on Wilson's arm, and VP Richard went completely still, because he recognized that face. It wasn't just any old man. It was the chairman, Harold Pendleton. Nate's street sweeper grandfather, joke from earlier, suddenly landed like a detonating bomb. The guard holding Nate tightened his grip out of reflex, then stopped as a red laser appeared on his forehead. One of the chairman's security team didn't even raise his voice. Release him. The guard did it immediately. Nate stumbled forward, rubbing his wrist, breathing hard. Grandpa! The chairman didn't even look at him at first. His gaze swept the room once, took in Wilson on the floor, Finn standing between them, the guards, the scattered executives, and the fear. Then his eyes stopped on VP Richard. Richard tried to smile. It came out broken. Chairman, this is a misunderstanding. We were just what? The chairman interrupted softly. That softness was worse than yelling. Richard swallowed. We were handling internal fraud. A gatekeeper, Finn, refused to sign responsibility for a $100 million leak. Silence. The chairman finally stepped forward. Each step echoed. Finn, he said. I didn't answer immediately. One of the guards still had me half restrained, but even he was looking uncertain now. The chairman's eyes narrowed slightly. Let him go. The guard released me instantly. The room felt like it was holding its breath. The chairman looked at Wilson next. Wilson straightened slowly, wiping a thin line of blood from his cheek where he'd been shoved earlier. You called internal affairs? The chairman asked. Yes, Wilson replied evenly. A falsified embezzlement case. Coerced confession attempt. Physical assault on employees. Multiple violations. The chairman nodded once. Then he turned to Richard. You told my grandson I'd approve this? Richard's mouth opened. No sound came out. Zach stepped back instinctively, bumping into a shelf. A few bolts clattered to the floor like gunfire in the silence. The chairman took one more step forward and finally smiled. Small, controlled, almost disappointed. You've been very busy in my company. He lifted a hand slightly. One of his aides immediately handed him a thin file. He flipped it open once. Close it again. That's enough, he said. Then, without raising his voice. Security. Detain VP Richard. Audit every account he's touched for the past 5 years. Richard finally broke. Chairman, please. This is a misunderstanding. Wilson is lying. He's just... 2 security officers moved in. Richard tried to back away, but there was nowhere left to go. Logan stumbled forward. Sir, we were following procedure. The chairman didn't even glance at him. You were following greed. Logan stopped dead. Zach, shaking now, whispered, This can't be real. The chairman's eyes finally shifted to him. And you, he said quietly, are Zachary Mills? Zach stiffened. Yes, sir. Promoted over Finn 3 years ago. Zach nodded quickly, desperate. The chairman closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. When he opened them again, the decision was already made. You won the chair, he said, by stealing it. Zach's face went white. The chairman turned slightly toward Wilson. Internal affairs will take them all. Every document, every transaction, every signature. Wilson gave a single nod. Then the chairman's gaze finally landed on me. Not angry, not disappointed, measuring. You stayed in my company after they buried you here, he said. I shrugged lightly. Didn't have anywhere better to be. A few executives flinched at the answer. The chairman didn't. Instead, he gave a faint exhale that almost sounded like amusement. That's going to change, he said. Behind him, the internal affairs team was already moving in. Handcuffs clicking, papers being seized, phones confiscated. Richard's shouting faded as he was dragged toward the exit. Logan followed. Zach didn't resist when they came for him. None of them looked back at me. Only the chairman did. And for the first time in 3 years, the warehouse didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like the place where everything had just been exposed. The aftermath didn't happen in dramatic bursts anymore. It happened in paperwork. A lot of it. Within 48 hours, the West Side warehouse became the center of a full corporate and criminal investigation. Internal affairs didn't just look into it. They froze accounts, seized servers, and pulled every contract VP Richard had ever signed. By the end of the week, police were on site with warrants. The company's legal department issued a public statement. Full cooperation with authorities, immediate suspension of all implicated executives, and an external audit mandated by court order. Richard didn't get to argue his way out of it this time. Neither did Logan. Neither did Zach. The charges stacked quickly. Asterisk fraudulent accounting of over $100 million in corporate funds. Asterisk coerced falsification of financial liability onto an employee. Asterisk assault and unlawful detention. Inside a workplace. Asterisk obstruction of internal investigation. Asterisk abuse of corporate authority for personal gain. The district attorney's office treated it like what it was, organized corporate fraud with violence attached. In court, VP Richard tried one last performance. Tailored suit, calm voice, corporate innocence. It collapsed the moment audit logs were projected behind him. Emails, transfers, altered reports, threats to blacklist dissenters. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. Zach folded even faster. Once his plea deal was offered, he gave up everything. Emails, recordings, and the full chain of how he had stolen my accounts and fabricated the kickback accusations years earlier. Logan, who had been loudest in the warehouse, went silent in court. The moment the assault footage was shown, his lawyers stopped arguing entirely. The company's public purge followed. Harold Pendleton personally oversaw the restructuring. Within a month, the entire executive layer involved was removed. Compliance was rebuilt under external regulators. A whistleblower protection office was created and legally enforced. Every department linked to the fraud case was audited retroactively. Wilson testified in person as president, confirming the internal corruption chain. Nate's testimony sealed the coercion angle, proving the attempt to intimidate and force falsified liability. My name was cleared in full court record. Not quietly, not vaguely, legally erased from the accusation entirely. The judge made it explicit in the ruling. The defendant Finn was wrongfully targeted in a coordinated corporate fraud scheme and is hereby fully exonerated of all charges, with public record correction mandated. 1 month later, I stood outside the same warehouse gates. Except now, there were no guards yelling, no executive sneering, just silence, and a formal letter in my hand. Reinstatement offer. Full director position restored. Back pay. And a separate clause I almost laughed at. Compensation for reputational and psychological damages. Court-determined settlement pending arbitration. Behind me, Wilson adjusted his glasses. You could sue them further, he said. Civil damages would be substantial. Nate, leaning against a car like he owned the world, added casually, or just take half the company and call a day. I looked at both of them, then back at the building. 3 years of being buried at a gate. 3 years of watching people step over me like I was invisible. Now the law had done what it always eventually does. It arrived late, but it arrived heavy. I'm not going back to that desk, I said. Wilson raised an eyebrow. Then what? I slipped the letter into my pocket. I'm taking the division they used to hide me in and rebuilding it. A pause. Nate grinned. That sounds like revenge with a salary. Wilson nodded once. That sounds like getting payback. I started walking away from the warehouse gates.